a bit of everything. It sort of feels a bit of normality coming back, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we have all realised is that although, of course, sport isn't a priority, it kind of does have a big importance in a lot of people's lives. We don't realise how much time we spend watching sport, talking about sport, preparing to watch sport, whether it's football, Formula One, MotoGP, whatever it is. It's an inherent part of our DNA being British, I think, isn't it? Because we love our sports and it brings us so much joy, so much pleasure. So as soon as we can get up and running, obviously that will be good at the right time. I don't know about you. I'm sort of at the stage where we would be going to Mugello, and I kind of have stopped doing that now. I've stopped thinking, oh, we should be in, because we're not, and we're not going to be, and we're going to have a juggled season if we get a season, and it's just going to be different, isn't it? We're going to have to look at it differently. I'm imagining Formula One will be similar to MotoGP in that the paddock will be very slimmed down. I don't know whether you've been told you'll have any presence in the paddock, for example, at Sky. How does it work, Martin? Do you know?
I don't know for sure. I think it's still, it's a bit of a moving goalpost, isn't it? Because it looked like F1 was getting well organised for a couple of races in Austria and then a couple of races at Silverstone. And then this 14-day quarantine turned up from June the 8th, which is a whole new ball game. And I think there will be a skeleton crew there. Whether I'm one of them, I don't know. I put my hand up to go because I'd prefer to commentate from the action, from the side of the racetrack, and go and stand at the corners and get a feel for, our job is to amplify the sport we follow, isn't it? Yours with motorbike racing, me with car racing, and to really convey and take the sport to the fans, and to convey that you need to be there. I think I don't really want to be in a bunker somewhere just watching it on telly. I want to be able to soak it up. Everybody wants to be there to soak it up if they can, but small steps in the beginning. So it's if we go racing, and I think it's likely there'll be a small crew there, because we go on Sky F1. We go out to 80 territories around the world, English speaking, and our show goes to quite a lot of countries in its entirety. So we're quite a big voice of Formula One. So we'll see. I don't know. But I'm not looking forward much to the way, if we go in this biosphere where we're not allowed to move, we'll be tested every 48 hours, I believe. We've got to go back to our designated hotel. I don't know if we can't leave the hotel. I think we're all going to fill up on Wiener Schnitzel and I don't know, beer or something if we go to Austria, but we'll get away with it.
Well, that doesn't sound too bad. There are worse places, aren't there, to go to on the Formula One calendar where you would be a little
exactly.
stuck. I don't know about you. I wasn't personally particularly keen on being in Bahrain. That wasn't one of my favourite. Are there any races? I know you live and breathe Formula One, and I'm not trying to be negative, but there are races. There must be on the calendar that you don't like as much as the big ones, really.
Well, I must admit, being constrained and not being able to go to any of them, I'm even missing Heathrow Airport at the moment.
You'll take any of them.
I never thought that would ever leave my lips, that statement, that's for sure. I love Bahrain, actually. I love going there. We have a great Grand Prix there. I'm not ever so keen on Sochi. It's not one of my favourite places. It's a bit of a arseache to get to, but no, I love them all, to be honest. I don't know as I'd want to be parachuting into the middle of Sao Paulo and Mexico City right now, given what's going on, but that's just for here and now. They're good Grand Prix. If Grand Prix cars are going around the track, I want to be there, and I'm happy with any of them, really. And it's really remotivated me to just because sometimes you stand in those queues, don't you, at security, and you're taking your belt off, and is this a liquids out, laptop out, iPad out or not sort of queue? You never know until you get to the front of it, shoes off or not, around the world. And sometimes I find myself thinking, what are you doing, Martin? Why are you still doing this? All of those thoughts will have gone out of my head for a long while. Yeah,
it's a real level of this, isn't it? It really makes you reevaluate lots and lots of things. Obviously, you're very keen to get back on the road and get going. And let's talk about you for a bit, Martin, because You've had an extraordinary career in two parts, really. Incredibly successful broadcasting career and an incredibly successful driving career, which obviously a large part of it was Formula One. People will know you Formula One. But some great wins elsewhere, actually. World Sports Car, Daytona, Le Mans 24 Hour. And I always feel in Formula One, I always can't believe that you never won a race, actually, because you should have won races. And when I look at how great you were in a car and the people that you beat, it's incredible that there isn't race wins there. How do you feel now about that, looking back sort of over 2 decades ago?
Oh, I never really think about it until somebody mentions it. No, it's a bit frustrating because, you know, when I came through the ranks in Formula 3, I was fighting Senna tooth and nail. And when I was teammates with Schumacher, I beat him on quite a lot of occasions in the race, but he was a new boy back then. So I got unlucky in 2 or 3 races where the car broke down, and one race in Spa, I should have pitted a lap earlier for for dry tyres and that sort of thing. But you can't go back and scold yourself for all of that. But the bottom line is I didn't put myself in a winning position or opportunity enough times. And when I was, you know, I finished on the podium 10 times, and a lot of those were second places, or some of them at least. And, you know, it was one of those days where you hope the guy in front might break down, but he didn't. But you don't want to reverse into a victory. So a lot of my racing career appears to have been a fact-finding mission for my TV career. And I'm very lucky to have had 2 careers out of Formula One. There's no doubt about it. And yeah, I won a lot of sports car races around the world, and like the Daytona 24 Hours, Le Mans 24 Hours, and things like that, touring cars. I've driven everything. I even did a truck race at Donington with Barry Sheen and Stavros, believe it or not, back in 1984 and things. And I've done autocross, rallycross, rallying, everything. I love anything that's moving along on 4 wheels. So I did my best. I smashed myself up badly in year 1 of Formula One, and I took my left foot basically off my leg. And that really held me back later on, held me back in terms of some of the fitness training I could do. But when Formula One cars became 2-pedal cars with paddle shift on the steering wheel, and you could right like a cart, basically, right foot for go and left foot for stop. My left foot didn't work, and still clearly doesn't. So that held me back quite a lot. But you know what? I'm a lot better off than many of the guys that I race against, because they didn't make it through, or they had bigger accidents or whatever. So no complaints. I had my chances. I took them in other disciplines, but F1, it didn't quite work out. But as I said, it's really, you know, I had 10 seasons as a driver, which prepared me nicely. But I went into the commentary box with dear old Murray, kicking and screaming. I did not want to be a commentator. I thought I was driving for your mate EJ in. I hear he's lodging with you, isn't he? Eddie Geordie? Did I hear that he's?
No, no, that's it's close. No, it's the the Geordie lodger. I don't think I could lodge with EJ. I don't think I would be sane at this point.
No, it's in his dreams he'd like to be lodging there, wouldn't he, EJ? But no, I thought
I don't know. He's a real one-off, EJ, isn't he? I mean, he's a tough businessman. And what was it like to work and drive for him then? Because you know, he's got a hilarious side, but he's also got a really strong side to him.
Oh, great businessman. So we first met in end of 1982. I'd lost my Formula 3 driver. My team boss, Dave Price, said, I'm going to send you to see a guy. Sorry, I can't do anything with you next year. I'm going to send you to see a guy. And so I drove up to Silverstone. The guy I went to see was Eddie. And he was potless, basically. Marie was there, breastfeeding. Zoe, I think, the first one. There was nothing in the house. You know, Eddie was trying to keep his teams going, and which is why I begrudge him absolutely none of his success or his wealth or whatever, because he earned it the hard way. And then we went down to breakfast, and then 2 Formula 4 drivers came down, Irish Formula 4 drivers. I didn't even know were in the house. Came down for breakfast as well. But Eddie was sort of renting out, you know, one of his rooms, And somehow we got it together where I'd won £5,000 as a young driver of the year thing, gave him a Citroen Estate off my dad's car forecourt for the crew car, painted his best mate's truck in my spray booth at the dealership, and we set about Formula 3 season up against Senna, believe it or not. We did 22 races, won loads of them. So that's how I first got to, and Eddie was brilliant. I mean, as I went over to the factory, I had to drop by the Allied Irish Bank in Northampton and give them 250 quid or 300 quid, whatever I'd made in commission selling cars that week, I'd give to the Allied Irish Bank. And we got through the season somehow. So I go back a very, very long way. Our F1 experience wasn't that great. I broke his car in half 3 corners into my first ever lap, racing for Jordan in Grand Prix in Melbourne. I literally smashed the thing up like an egg. And the car wasn't great that year, and I was probably getting to the end of my useful life as a Formula 1 driver without realising it. So it was fun. I had some good WhatsApp with Eddie just the other day, actually.
He's you know what you're doing? You're smoothing over some massive stories here. Can we just go back to 1983 then? Because that must have been a pivotal year for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I was a hobby racer, really. I mean, even when I first got into Formula 1 in '84, I was still selling cars. I finished 5th in my first race in Brazil, flew home and went straight to the sales office to sell some cars. I was literally, I was potless at the time. So in '83, Senna turned up, and it really annoyed me because everybody assumed he was going to win the championship, and he won the first 9 races. I was second 8 times and third once, and then I beat him in a straight fight at Silverstone. He crashed trying to stay with me. I was obviously in the Jordan F3 car, and 2 things happened that day. One is Ayrton knew I could beat him in the same car on the same day, and I knew I could beat him. And then it just turned around. He crashed into me, landed on my shoulder once at Alton Park, and we went into the final round where I was 1 point ahead. But he beat me in the final round. But the best man won that championship because Ayrton, is for me the greatest driver that ever sat in a Formula 1 car. So in a way, I mean, he was going to F1 anyway, but it launched us. There was so much interest on this F3 championship. It launched us both into F1 the following year, and I was at Tyrrell.
Yeah, you were, and of course it was going well until that smash where you just mentioned a few minutes ago that you smashed your ankles and your feet up. But I mean, your left foot, there was talk of amputating it, wasn't there?
Yeah, I was in this hospital. That was when Bernie used to stop all of the local TV channels showing any F1 because he wanted everybody to go to the race as a spectator.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. I used to have that kind of control, Bernie did. So I remember laying in hospital, smashed up, feeling pretty sorry for myself. And this nurse kept coming in with a pin going like, "Can you feel this?" And then I realized what was going on after a while. So I started to say yes, but I couldn't because my ankle had swollen up so much that they were concerned about gangrene or something. And they were about to amputate my foot. And Sid Watkins got hold of it. He was the F1 doc then and for a very long time after that, and got me out of there and back to England. And this guy in Harley Street put my foot back on my leg. I've got them actually in my trophy cabinet. I keep them there because we eventually got disqualified completely from that season. So I don't exist in 1984, except I limp every morning when I get up. And I've got 3 massive screws from when they put my foot back on my leg. And I've got the trophy from Detroit when I finished second behind Piquet. So I would definitely existed that year. But they got me home, and it took a month. I was in, and then one night I got a call, late one night I got a call from a guy called Barry Gill, a journalist who's no longer with us, and asking me for a comment on Tyrrell getting thrown out of the World Championship. And you what? And my legs are both up in slings, both because I smashed my right foot up as well. And here I am getting a call. I was in a private room in this clinic, getting a call about being thrown out of the championship. Ken hadn't got round to telling me at that point. So they were pretty grim days, actually. It took a while psychologically I think I raced again the next season, obviously in F1, but I don't think my head was quite in the right place, and certainly my body wasn't.
Talk about sliding doors moments, though, really. Yeah. A big, massive, life-changing things like that. I mean, you did say that obviously it affected your training, it did affect your career. But you also mentioned there that your head wasn't in the right place in 1985, sorry.
Yeah.
It is all about your head, isn't it?
Sports, everything about your head. Yeah, I mean, as long as you've fundamentally got some fitness and, you know, hydration, nutrition and all of that, it's about your head. And I think that's why, you know, take Nigel Mansell as a very good example. If you look at his junior career, it wasn't really that spectacular, but he was so self-confident. He reminds me of Nick Fowler and people like that. So 70% of the great sports people I've been lucky enough to meet around the world, I would say, are insecure, feel they're driven because they're never satisfied with what they achieve. Not that they're supremely confident people at all. They're just driven to always want to do better. And then the other 30%, I would say, have a self-confidence like Mansell, that he is the greatest. And Nigel literally picked a Formula One car up and threw it around the racetrack in the most impressive way. So you get different characters, of course. It's what makes sport and life so interesting. But yeah, it is. If you're not, especially if you're in an F1 car, you're doing 150, 180 miles an hour through Eau Rouge in the rain or something, you need to believe in yourself. You can't, or you're at Hockenheim or Monza, there's really, the high-speed circuits, and it's pouring a rain. You cannot see where you're going. You can't even see, that moment when you pass a truck on the motorway on a really wet day and it just obliterates your windscreen. Your wipers can't quite cope with it. When you're at a high-speed track in the rain, your screen is your visor. So sometimes you can't even see your own steering wheel. So all of your other senses go into hyper mode when you're listening to the car in front. Your peripheral vision, you're picking up the braking boards or a grandstand as a reference point you thought you knew. And at that moment, you press the throttle harder. That's when you still want to do it. And that's the bit that sort of sorts you out, really, as to whether you've still got what it takes when you can't see where you go. You're doing thick end of 200 miles an hour and you press the throttle a little bit harder. And then the silly thing that happens is you all start slowing down and the ball of spray comes down. Then you realize you've not quite made it to the corner yet and you accelerate again or something. But they're the key moments where you test yourself out. Qualifying lap at Monaco or something like that. So there's nowhere to run and hide from yourself or with that many sensors on the car and cameras pointing at you, or anybody else for that matter.
I was listening to a great podcast that you did with Tom Clarkson last night, and it was really interesting hearing you talk about Senna and his level of knowledge of grip. Do you think that was innate to him in terms of what he could see, or what he felt, or do you feel that was because of his karting experience, or was he a real one-off for you?
Yeah, he had a God-given talent, I think. I mean, he was a very emotionally driven man, and so I saw a lot of traits in him in Formula 3 in '83 that I saw all through his Formula 1 career. He would run you off the road if he got half a chance, if he felt things weren't going as they should be going. Paradoxically, he'd be the first man to get out of his car and run back towards you, which he did when he hit me in Monza in 1993. When it was his fault, he was adjusting his brake bias, looking down, and just creamed into the back of me at high speed. But he always was convinced the establishment was against him, and a very emotionally driven man, Ayrton, unlike Michael Schumacher, who was driven very much from the head. And Ayrton, but he had this gift of, the qualifying laps he did, or in the wet conditions like at Donington, he somehow seemed to know where there was grip. And you must have seen bike races like it. I'm sure Valentino's like it, or McDoohan back in the day, also. These guys who somehow find a bit extra, they get the throttle on a bit harder or whatever. And you think, how do they know that? I had a situation at Silverstone, if I've got time to explain exactly what I mean, when
you've got as much time as you can give us.
I was on the front row of the grid with Ayrton, and I got a better start, which often happened. It was pouring with rain. and we went down to Stowe Corner, the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit. It went down the outside, and I thought, see you, wouldn't want to be here out there, mate. And he went all the way around the outside and came out in front of me, and I was on what I perceived to be the racing line. How did you do that? Then there was a big crash behind us, red flag, so we had to go back to the pits and then go back around to start what would now be a two-part race. This time, Ayrton beat me away, and he won. I was second. And on the podium, I said to him, your line into Stowe in the second part of the race didn't work, did it? He said, I don't know. I didn't try. It was too wet. And because I tried to go down there, going back to the grid, hit this big puddle of water across the grass, skimmed the barrier, just got away with it. Because I wanted to go and try out Ayrton's line. But he and that explains to me, I think explains somehow he had this gift, this understanding. That's why we saw him, when he was racing in, the famous 93 race in Donington, for example, or whatever, or the first race he won for Lotus in the treacherous, a race I was in Estoril that was horrendous. And then Monaco, when he was about to win Monaco in that flying pig Tolman thing it used to be called, he was just extraordinary. And that's why when he died that day, May Day 94, we were like, it must have been when Jim Clark died. You think, well, if it can happen to Jim Clark, or if it can happen to Ayrton Senna, it can happen to any of us, because they had I think we all assumed they got a greater car control. So, but that was Ayrton. Wish he was still around.
Yeah, and obviously you knew Ayrton well. I mean, you raced against him a lot. You beat him at times. Did you have a, for want of a better word, a chatty relationship with him? Did you, or was it very professional?
I wouldn't say I knew him well. I raced against him over an 11-year period. I met him. I was talking to him the night before he died in the hotel reception, actually, and then we got in the lift. But no, I wouldn't pretend I knew him well or that I was a friend of his. We had a little bit of a fisticuffs sort of thing on track in Formula 3. In F1, it was fine. He got in my way once. I got in his way at Spa, and he came storming into my debrief at Brabham and all sorts of things. We were fine. We got on fine, but I wouldn't say. But I don't think drivers, I think the youngsters today, when they start WhatsApping each other and having a right old laugh, I don't quite get that, because it's great for us in the media, isn't it? When they're Instagramming or Twitch or whatever they're doing and having a right old laugh together. Kind of, I just wanted to beat all those guys, and they wanted to beat me. I don't understand how you can be wheel to wheel at a couple 100 miles an hour and be mates. But I may prove to be wrong. Well, that's how the youngsters rock and roll certainly in F1. Yeah,
I guess a lot has changed in F1 over the years. Some things gladly, the safety aspect for one. I mean, you were, driving in an era where you would, it just wasn't as safe as it is now. Not that it's safe now, it's motor racing, of course. There's always that element of danger. But how do you, you've got to have the self-confidence, but also self-preservation when you're a driver. How does that work? And how did that sit with you?
Well, you have to have mind manage the fact that whenever you step over the side of an F1 car, for example, and it must be the same on a MotoGP bike, especially, and I don't know how they do that, especially in the rain with little, little contact patches, smaller than my phone or something. I just don't know how they do it on a MotoGP or any race bike. But you have to mind manage that you might be seriously injured, you might be paralyzed, or you might be killed. And then when I had to do that, when I had kids, and most drivers, end up with kids at some later stage of their career, that's just the risk you're prepared to take, because it's a bit gladiatorial, but that's what you feel you were born to do. It's what you love to do, and the rewards are great. And I don't just mean financially. In fact, I don't really mean financially at all. I mean the satisfaction to drive an F1 car around Monaco, for example, or all the great circuits of the world, to be up on the podium, and it's just magnificent, a magnificent satisfaction and achievement and high, and like an adrenaline rush that you which is why I like doing a bit of live TV now, because it's like a drug, isn't it? Adrenaline. So
yeah, it is. But I can't imagine. I mean, for me, it's my drug, live television. But I can't imagine it's anywhere near driving a Formula One car. I mean, you can say, because you have both. You've done both. So if you broke them down into percentages, let's say, going live on television, driving a Formula One car, being on the grid.
Live telly, say just before the grid walk, 30% as exciting as being a driver on the grid, and that's pretty high compared to most, most. So when they say in your ear, okay, Q Suzi, Q Martin, whatever, that's it, you're off, and whatever comes out of your mouth that's idiotic will be on YouTube in a heartbeat forever. So yeah, it's a bit challenging, but no, I think I think it has to be. I wonder if it's too safe today. Honestly, people will tune in or pay to be in the grandstands or watch it on TV because you're doing something they either couldn't do or wouldn't want to do because you're putting your life on the line. So I don't think you can sanitize it too much. The tracks are very, very safe now. Nobody likes death in the name of sport, of course. But there has to be a challenge. There has to be a peril, I think. And I think as the drivers get ever further into the car, so all you can see is the top of their crash helmets and the halo and the pillows, as I call them, beside them and all that sort of thing. And, they crash at unbelievable speeds, jump out, and everything's fine. Everybody's quite relieved by that. But I do think there has to be something a bit scary about it to make you feel like you're alive, like you're on edge, and make it worthwhile for people to give up their important Sunday afternoons, precious Sunday afternoons, to watch you.
A lot of people, I won't call out all the names, but lots of people want to know the new rules that are coming in, the new regs that are coming in. Do you think that they will enhance the racing in terms of making the racing closer?
Yes, I do. I think the new cars that they've now been put back to 2022 will be better for overtaking. A lot of research gone into that. They can't hopefully be worse. And the cost cap, so the teams are moving much closer together in what they're allowed to spend. Formula One's I've been saying it for years now, but particularly the last 3 years, what we were building was unsustainable. Now, nobody saw a pandemic coming along, but something was going to make it go bang, and it is at the moment. So I think what's going to emerge out of this is better F1 racing. And I saw a comment, I think it was John Tott, concerned that after all of this tragedy in the world, people would be less interested in watching motorsport. I don't agree with that. I think people would be more interested in watching live sport, to be honest. But I think you don't know what you're missing till you haven't got it anymore, do you? And so it comes back to what we were saying very early on in this conversation. So I do believe Formula One will come out of this leaner and meaner. And I love the new kids we've got in town. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, George Russell, Alex Albon, Ocon. They're mad. They make crazy overtaking moves that they get away with somehow. They're fearless because they know the cars and the tracks are so safe, and they jump out, and they're very televisual, and they're very open and easy to talk to. So I love that aspect of F1 at the moment. So I'm as I head towards 36, 37 years in it, I'm as motivated by it today as I've ever been.
That's good to hear. You talk about the new guard there. A word on the old guard. Lots of people, of course, asking about Seb. Thoughts on Mr. Vettel?
Well, do you know what? I think he could be, once we get up and racing this year, I think watch out for him. He's got nothing to lose, has he? He's leaving Ferrari. I think he'll be mighty. He's got a lot of speed. He just fell out of love with the team. I sensed it through last year, actually, and they fell out of love with him a little bit. And I don't think they're prepared to accept Leclerc's their future, just like Verstappen's the future at Red Bull. And they didn't want their two cars running into each other and drivers ignoring the team orders and all that. If you're spending 400 million euros to go Formula One racing, you don't see your two cars crash into each other, do you? So somehow they ended up with 2 bulls in the same field, and it's Seb that's going. Whether he lands somewhere else in a works Renault seat or he'd be pushing at Mercedes, he might get used at Mercedes as a bit of a stick to beat Lewis's salary down with. I don't know, but you're not going to replace Lewis Hamilton with Seb Vettel, are you? And they're both well into their 30s when all the new guard are in their early 20s. So Seb, I'm a great fan of Seb. I find him an adult to talk to amongst boys sometimes. His speed, his commitment. He's done a few crazy things. But I know from my own career, from watching, say, Michael Schumacher, when I was managing DC, you start tripping over things towards the end. Somehow your judgment goes a little bit. I don't know if you've seen this in bike racing, but start having silly incidents that you didn't used to have. And whether Seb's reached that point or not, I don't know.
I don't know about... I don't know whether this has happened to Seb because I'm not in the paddock, and I think you can only tell these things when you're in the paddock. But what I've seen in the MotoGP paddock is ego completely takes over sometimes and controls wrong decision making, going to the wrong teams and maybe staying too long or whatever it is. But a lot of ego-driven things happen. It seems.
Yeah, but you need a crystal ball, don't you? Because a team can sit down and tell you, we've got this engine here, that engine, these tyres, the new chassis. You know, especially in F1, you know, every year you're going to have so much more downforce and so much more power. You'll run into the back of yourself. You're going to have so much speed, you know. And you take a decision. The money's right. They're giving you all the terms you want, and you jump. So maybe it's ambition. Sometimes a bit of ego. Sometimes running away from where you are for whatever reason. So it's really easy to criticize sports people, but motorsport people especially, for jumping teams and getting it wrong. But often we, like Daniel Ricciardo, a kid I like a lot, you couldn't help but look at that and go, that's the wrong move, Daniel. You know, to leave Red Bull and go to Renault just felt wrong, didn't it? And it was wrong.
Yeah, it's we haven't got a crystal ball, and often, you know, it's difficult to know the complete story, isn't it, on why people do things. And that mix is the mix that can make you a world champion or deny you the chance. I mean, talk about sliding doors moments and wrong timing. You have to look at Fernando Alonso, I suppose, in that respect. Hey, Mark, a guy called Mark Blundell has been on. He says, Martin ran me off the road in Estoril. Ask him about that one. Well, listen, I will ask you about something to do with teammates, because you've had actually an extraordinary lineup of teammates, including Blundell, Sterling Moss, Schumacher, Rubens Barrichello. And I know Mark wanted me to ask you, who's been your favourite teammate?
Well, it's Mark. That's why I asked you to ask me. We were the Brundle brothers. I think we were teammates at Brabham, we were teammates at Ligier, and I don't think at a race we missed a breakfast, a lunch, or a dinner together. I used to pick him up at his place near Cambridge, and off we'd trot around the world. It was great. We'd share a private jet. We that one day, the day I ran him off the road, we were in a private jet out of Cambridge into somewhere near Estoril, and I was much faster in my Ligier than he was in his McLaren. Must have been 95, and I felt he was holding me up. So I, at 150 miles an hour, just ran him off the road. Nicely. I mean, nicely. But he was bouncing down the grass, and I was just angry, really, and he was angry. The problem is, we then had to fly home in this little 4-seater private jet.
Did you speak?
The pair of us, no. We both read the newspaper, and I was probably paying him back for the time when I tried to get on a plane in Nagoya. I was in first class. I was earning a few more quid than Mark. And to be told that I was already on the plane. Like, well, excuse me, but I'm not. I won't do the Japanese accent, so I'm not very good at it, and it's probably not very PC these days. But
probably not.
I said, excuse me, I can't be on the plane because I'm here, look. And no, you're already on the plane. So I walk on with this person from the airline, and there sits Blundell, who's briefed everybody in first class. There sits Blundell with a glass of champagne, going like, all right, Marty. And I completed the journey from Nagoya to Australia somewhere, to Adelaide or something, in 36J. He wouldn't get out of my seat. So I was paying him back, really, stuck him in the wall.
Well, I think that's fair enough. It's nice to hear the other side of that story, because of course that is one that Mark told when he came on a couple of weeks ago, which made us all laugh. Because if you write your name in Japanese, it's actually the same surname, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it sounds like it. Yeah, it was funny. It was funny. Everybody was giggling away. But no, we had a whale at the time, racing, but we were always very competitive against each other as well. Two Ros beefs in the Ligier team.
Yeah, exactly. He said, and admitted on here, he said that I just wasn't selfish enough. He felt that. I mean, I always find both of you very, very honest and really interesting to talk to. But he said he just ultimately wasn't selfish enough to, to become a Formula One world champion. And do you share that sentiment?
Yeah, you need enough bastard in you sometimes to do things or to make moves or whatever. But you need the speed. You need all the attributes, really, because you are one of 22, 24 in the world that's qualified to drive a Greg's 20 at the moment. Yeah. Back in those days, somewhere between 20 and 26 on the grid. It's really hard to get there. It's even harder to stay there. And so you're up against the absolute elite from the entire world, driving those F1 cars. And then, of course, the equipment varies widely as well, and you've got to get in the right equipment. But the cream always rises to the top. The best drivers get in the best cars. So it is to get there is quite an achievement. But if you're there's always a Senna or a Schumacher or a Hakkinen to spoil your day, in my experience, somewhere. In sports car racing, I didn't have that. I had a confidence, a supreme self-confidence in a sports car. The way the cars handled suited my driving style, and my man was Tom Walkinshaw at Jaguar, and he treated me like a son, if you like. And
do you feel like you needed that kind of guidance to put you in your supreme place then?
Yeah, I think some people need a lot of stick and others need a lot of carrot and a bit of an arm around the shoulder. You need a bit of both sometimes, because you're always pushing yourself hard anyway. But yeah, a bit of, if you feel when you come back in the garage, I mean, I had this at McLaren, so did DC actually, when Ron could only be in love with one driver at any time, and it was Mika. And when I mean, Ron would, a huge amount of respect for Ron Dennis, what he achieved, the level of excellence, the vision the man had. But before the start of the race, and you're having the final technical briefing, and Ron comes in and sits down on Mika's side of the table and go, "What are we doing?" And they whatever strategy they've got, and then Ron goes, "What are they doing?" And I think I'm actually part of this Works McLaren team as well. But
exactly what DC said, yeah.
That sort of psychology really eats you up. In fact, sitting in a filing cabinet over there, DC was always going on about this, about how Ron with Mika and all that sort of thing, and how it psychologically affected him. I said, DC, come on, you stop being girls' bladders, basically. I tell you what, write me a letter and tell me what's upset you about all this. He wrote me the most incredible letter, and I never challenged him again. But all the little things that had happened that made him feel less than 100% in the McLaren team at that time, and it was an extraordinarily powerful letter, actually, that I've still got. So, yeah, I think you do need that psychology. Some people, some don't. Some have that. I talked about it earlier. That supreme inner confidence. Most don't, and you need a bit of reassurance. Isn't that life generally?
I think. Well, I'm very much in that camp of somebody saying to me, "Right, come on, you can do this." And then on the other hand, you're doing this because you can do it. If you know what I mean, like an arm round, but go get it. And what I don't need is somebody putting me down in order to motivate me. That doesn't motivate me. It scares the bejeebers out of me, and it makes me less than I can be. What always surprises me about Ron Dennis is that he couldn't see that it actually crushes people. But that's another story. I know I've got so many questions to ask you. I want to ask you first of all about 2 weeks ago was the 70th anniversary, of course, of Formula One World Championship, and you're the only man that's ridden cars from every single decade, which is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it might have been, a showcase, filming for Sky or whatever, but how fantastic for you to have crossed the decades in those cars.
Yeah.
And can you just tell us, first of all, what is it a driver wants in a car? I mean, obviously the speed, but is the next important thing, the feel of the car?
Yeah, well, I've driven a championship winning car from every one of those 7 decades. So I've been really lucky with cars I raced in F1 over that period, and cars I've tested for F1 teams, whatever, and driven for TV. So I've driven 54 different F1 cars now, and hopefully there's more to come. So I know everything from, Fangio's W196 in the 50s to Lewis's, the 2 or 3 years ago, the latest hybrid Mercedes and that sort of thing. So, I mean, how they've evolved through that time, and quite slowly in the beginning, but they all had the same thing, and was something we call balance, where the front and the back slide in unison. So what you want is a car that won't surprise you, that roughly what the car's going to do next. So then because all you do is, whether it's a 50s Mercedes or a 2015 Mercedes, you find the limit of the grip and you drive to it, or maybe just over it if you can get away with it. And you've got pedals and a steering wheel and some mechanism to shift the gears. It was the same all the way through, the same challenge. And you just want a car that's benign, that you can work with. If you can take that corner flat out in 4th, or maybe you'll try it with a lift in 5th. Oh, that works. Maybe I'll try it flat out in 5th. And that's sort of something to build on, to give you that confidence and
allowing you to take it to the limit and just over the limit.
Yeah, without throwing the thing in the hedge and hurting yourself or whatever. That's what fascinates me about MotoGP, is when you see Marquez, actually losing the front of a bike and lobbing it down the road. He's doing exactly that. He's somewhat unfortunate that he doesn't have 4 wheels to keep him propped up like we do. But it's that sort of thing. But you don't want surprises, especially when you're in close action with another rider driver, or when the conditions change, or there's a bit of oil on the track, or so, especially at Le Mans, where you might get gravel, mist, fog, oil, debris, marshals, whatever. You want a car that is fundamentally, you know how to control it, and it's not going to bite your ass, basically.
And winning in Le Mans, just mentioning Le Mans there, the 24-hour. I know you had a few goes at it afterwards, which didn't come to fruition. But what does that victory mean to you? Because it's incredible to win that race.
It is. Billy Blundell won it as well. It's an extraordinary. It's a 36-hour race, because if you do the warm up, you do the warm up early Saturday morning. If you finish the race, it's late Sunday before you go to bed, and it's. You do the equivalent of what used to be like an 18-race Grand Prix season. You do the equivalent of that in a day at Le Mans. It's just the most extraordinary thing, where you're going to have now 40 scheduled pit stops in some of the cars and all that sort of thing. Logistically, so when you get to the end, the last time I did it was 2012 with my lad, Alex. I had a little tear rolling down my cheek as I crossed the line at the end of the race, because you feel like you've really achieved something in a 24-hour race. There's no doubt about it. So very, very satisfying, those long distance races.
And to be with Alex, of course, as well. I'm being asked, I can't see because I have my phone the other way around to get a better camera shot. But you've got some helmets behind you. What have you got behind you there?
It's actually I have got helmets from pretty much every year I raced. That's actually a Bell replica thing in a case. A really nice model of the Jag, I won, or we won, I should say, the Daytona 24 Hours in a Ferrigno picture of my Benetton from that amazing day at Silverstone when I had a big fight with Senna and ended up on the podium, beat Michael Schumacher, my teammate, and Nigel won the race and the track was invaded by the crowd.
That was amazing, yeah.
It was incredible. And then a Gilles Villeneuve Ferrari 312, which I think is I've driven one of those, the most beautiful Formula One cars ever, probably. So yeah, it's just my office. I was going to go outside, but it's probably a bit too noisy out there at the moment.
No, that's a very cool office. Thank you for
sharing. That's a McLaren skid lid, but it's a replica.
Thank you for that. Martin, you worked closely with the great Murray Walker. I've worked with Murray as well. I'm so in love with that man. For you, obviously, it wasn't where you wanted to be for at least the first year. Obviously, you wanted to still be driving, not sitting in a commentary box. But you did an incredible job. I wonder whether any of what you learned in commentary came from Murray, or do you feel as though it just was you just commentating, talking, seeing what you saw, feeling what you felt?
Oh no, I learned a huge amount from Murray. I spoke to him last week, actually. He's in his he's past 95, he's 96 now. Got a few physical struggles, but I just saw how's Murray pop up on the bottom of the screen here. Mentally sharp as a pin, wanted to know all about Formula One. So I sat down on the eve of the first race and said, just Murray, talk to me about commentary. Because I literally had, as I said, thought I was driving for Jordan that year. And he said, I can't tell you anything about Formula One. I said, come on, Murray, come on. You've done this forever. And he said, well, all I can say to you is just remember one thing. We're only here to inform and entertain. And I've remembered that ever since. And I would say having Murray to learn commentary, motorsport commentary from, is like having Pele to teach you how to kick a football. So I did learn a lot. And one of the smartest things I've ever done in my career was, I thought, well, if Murray likes to stand up, if it's good enough for Murray, it's good enough for me. So I stood up. So we ended up with this, I think he'd had a fairly tense relationship sometimes with James and possibly Jonathan, and they used to sit down and maybe look the other way or whatever. So I communicated with Murray standing up, and we had a rapport, and I showed him a lot of respect, because why wouldn't you? And just observed him, really, and he was fascinating, so much energy, and he made the occasional error, which I had to gently put right. And I think the audience sort of came with me on gently correcting Murray without trying to put him down. So I learned a great deal from him, and I got at that first race when the cars came to the grid, I was in absolute turmoil. Standing in the commentary box, Melbourne 97, because I was like, stop, wait, I'm not ready. You can't start this race without me. I'm not ready. And I really felt this sort of turmoil. And then after the race, I saw quite a lot of nice comments about my commentary with Murray, and I thought, oh, well, maybe this is not too bad. And 24 years later, I'm still doing it. So, it's to observe the great man at work is a privilege that I will always treasure.
And he has the best stories, doesn't he? He's a great raconteur.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he does. Yeah, but towards the end, he was a man who liked to have room service and write his notes up for the next day and all that kind of thing. So I wouldn't say he would have been well into his 70s. I wouldn't, but we used to march around the track. He always wanted to walk the track, which with my gammy left ankle, I found quite difficult to do, funnily enough. So I'd sometimes struggle to keep up with him. But he was a driving force, and he absolutely knew, and he had so much respect in the paddock. He'd get an interview with anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. A great man to work with. When I worked with him, he turned up with a stack of notes like this, and we knocked out 4 shows in a day. He had much more energy than me. And when I was going somewhere the next day, I can't remember where I was going to. It was a European race, I'm not sure. But he said to me, when he said goodbye to me, he said, I wish I was coming with you. And it really hurt, I thought, because he still lives, breathes motorsport generally, because he loves Formula One. He also loves his bikes, as I know that you do as well. And before we go, it would be remiss of me not to say what bike have you got at home at the moment, or bikes if you've got more than one, because I know that you do ride, don't you?
I do. I ride to 3 or 4 European races a year. I love biking, and more actually, especially these days. It seems like a great way to get around. It's the only thing I know that's got a guaranteed A to B time, basically, on the roads. Roads are a bit quiet at the moment, of course, out there. But I ride Taurus. Some people would say that's not a bike. It's a bike's a 1,000cc super bike.
Those days are gone, I think.
Yeah, I love riding them, but your wrists, your back, and then it's got a 100-mile range, and you need to find a gas station. I hate stopping for fuel. So I've got a BMW K1600 GT. It's 6-cylinder. It's too big for me really as a bike, but I love it. And it just sits. It's incredible. You sit on the motorway, obviously in Germany, where you're allowed to go this fast, but it's pouring rain, doing 100 miles an hour, and it is. And you look down, you're not even wet. It's just the most incredible bike for touring. And then you get. Last year I went Spa to Monza through the Alps, and it's plenty quick enough. It's just an amazing bike with a decent range.
Oh, so that's why I ride that. Beautiful trip.
Oh, fantastic. The sun never stopped shining. Went Baden-Baden through Black Forest. Did 3 passes through the Alps, down past Lake Como, down into the back of Monza. Stunning. 3 days. Yeah. And then I rode home almost in one. I nearly came all the way home on the Monday after I got up like 4:30 in Monza, and I nearly rode 850 miles. If I hadn't have got a hotel booked, I'd have done it in a day.
Wow.
It's such a great bike. Yeah. So I do. I mean, I don't even know if you could do that at the moment. I don't think you're allowed to go off the Channel Tunnel into France at the moment without a piece of paper saying why. I think. No. I don't know.
No, you can't. You can't get into France unless you. I think unless you're a resident, unless you have a French passport or a resident.
So all those. Yeah, I'd love to. I had Spa and Monza booked. I had the French Grand Prix, and then on to where was I going after that? Austria. I had that booked as well. That looked like a great ride. So there's a freedom. Do you know what I think? What it does reminds me of being a racing driver. A bit. You're moving on quite quickly. You're looking at life through the letterbox of advisor. So it tends to make everything a bit more concentrated. It makes everything a bit and it's sort of energized, because you get rid of all your peripheral vision, just like sitting in the cockpit of an F1 car. You've got to read the road, otherwise you're going to hurt yourself. And there's a slight element of danger to it as well, which is probably a stupid thing to say, but there is. So you've got to concentrate all the time, and the freedom of the road, you can smell the air and just move along. I adore biking more and more. I'd like to do. I'd really like to do a massive tour through North and South America. It's on my to-do list.
That would be absolutely incredible. Me too. And this lockdown has made me start planning something on a bike, actually, because for years I've been saying I want to do a bike trip and maybe film some stuff, and you never do, because you're so busy with all the racing that we do and the travelling that we do, and by the time winter comes we don't want to do anything long haul anymore. But new ideas, new thoughts, new creativity. It's been absolutely joyous speaking to you, Martin. It's really a pleasure. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for being so nice to me, by the way, when I came and did Formula One. I really enjoyed talking to you, and you motivated me, actually, and made me feel very, very secure. And
are you doing any more? Are you doing any more F1 or?
No, I don't think so. It's MotoGP. Got a contract this year and next year. We'll see what happens. I mean, we don't know what the sport's going to do we? But
no.
Still follow it, obviously. Still, watch what's going on. Still very interested in what's going on. It's a fascinating paddock, fascinating world, Formula One, I think, in so many different ways. And very much enjoy your coverage. And really enjoy your grid walks, which I can't believe that we haven't talked about. So just quickly before we go, best moment, most embarrassing moment on a grid walk.
Oh, so many embarrassing. I've never watched one back in its entirety because I can't bear it at all. I don't recognise that cheeky, rude bloke who interrupts people, especially sports people who are just about to drive an F1 racing car. But that's my job on the grid. 9 minutes, unrehearsed, unscripted, car crash, live, global sports television. Frightens me to even say that, so that's why I don't watch it. Ozzy Osbourne and people like that were so funny. I spoke to Bryan Adams only using titles from his songs.
I remember that.
From his tracks, which was Ted Kravitz's idea. It wasn't my idea. I'm not a creative person. And then inevitably you get blanked. You know, Venus Williams blanked me, even though the team had asked me to go up and talk to her. I get blanked left, right, and centre, but I get over that. And then those hopeless moments when you hear me going, let's go for a MRP, a Marty's random person. You know I'm in trouble. I can't find anybody, and I'll just doorstep. And that really terrifies me because they go, you know, somebody's going to go, but it's me, Martin. You know me. You've known me 20 years. And like, oh my, because my mind is like on the rev limiter. So, yeah, I guess it's my trademark these days, isn't it? The grid walk. Everywhere I go, on the tube in London or an airport or a racetrack, they go like, they often say, we love your pit walk. I go, well, it's actually the grid walk, but thank you very much. It's really kind of you. And I think people live it with me, whether I'm having a good day or a bad day. And it's actually unique. And it was the ITV gang who said to me one day at Silverstone, 97, we've had an idea. Just walk down the grid and say what you see. You know, all right, I'll try that. And I was the only person on the grid. And now, of course, it's just a sea of media. I was literally, and I don't throw to a studio, I don't throw to a presenter. I, come hell or high water, I've got to keep going, which is what gets me quite excited about it. Yeah, and I've met some fascinating people. I had some brilliant conversations. And then, you know, a moment like going at 99, I think it was, Suzuka, walk up to Hakkinen. He's just about to pull he's got his balaclava on, he's just about to pull his helmet on. And he looks at me as much say, of all people in the world, man, you should know better than to interrupt me now. I go like, Mika, can you win this world championship? And he goes, yes, I can. 90 minutes later, he's the world champion, you know, just as he's pulling his crash helmet on. No other sport, really. Can you imagine doing that with David Beckham at Wembley or Nadal at Wimbledon and going, whoa, David, just before you kick that ball, you know, how is it? What do you think? Can you win this match? You wouldn't get anywhere near that. So this unique live sporting access to people who are just about to do something very special, I think I love it. I also love doing the podium interviews and that afterwards. They're bits I personally really enjoy because, or in Parc Ferme, because you see the adrenaline pumping around these kids after they've just had a great result, like the German Grand Prix last year would be a good example. The energy that's going on is just extraordinary. It really keeps me alive because I think motorsport keeps you young. There's no doubt about it. If I think of Bernie Ecclestone, Ken Tyrrell, Murray Walker and all that, being surrounded by young, ambitious, bright people really keeps you focused, keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you're just taking me back to so many moments as well for myself. And I used to do grid walks as well, starting when I was at Sky back in 1998. And again, you know, we were the only ones doing grid walks then, and brought it to the BBC. And I remember when 2000 at the BBC, there was a complaint from the head of sport who said, I'm not sure about all this presenter in vision, you know, because I was doing this sort of grid walk. And it's terrifying and exciting in equal amounts because you don't know what you're going to get. And that's what's so good about it. And that's, you know, why you unearth so much gold.